Days after her husband's sudden death, Ilara's mother-in-law cast her out into the freezing snow, laughing as she did. According to the will, Ilara had inherited nothing but a crumbling cabin in a remote mountain village, while her in-laws claimed the grand estate and the thriving business empire. That stormy night, with a tattered bag and a shattered spirit, Ilara trudged toward her inheritance, little knowing that behind those weathered doors lay a discovery that would rewrite her fate. But before we dive in, picture this as a gripping tale on your favorite storytelling channel. Drop a comment below with the city you're tuning in from. And smash that like button and subscribe to keep these heart-pounding stories coming your way. Alright, let's begin. Ilara's journey started exactly 8 days after Thorn's burial. The snow fell in thick, unrelenting sheets, transforming the world outside the opulent Aspen chalet into a blurred white void. It had been 8 long, agonizing days since Thornvale, Ilara's beloved husband of 7 years, was lowered into the frozen earth of the family plot on the estate's private grounds. The funeral had been a lavish affair, as befitting the Vale family's status black limousines crunching over iced driveways. Mourners in fur coats whispering condolences that felt more like social obligations than genuine grief. Ilara had stood there, numb, her simple black dress whipping in the wind, clutching a single red rose that Thorn had once told her symbolized eternal love. But inside the chalet now, the air was thick, not with sorrow, but with a palpable tension, like the calm before an avalanche. Ilara perched on the edge of a supple leather armchair in the grand living room, its cushions feeling as cold and unyielding as the marble floors beneath her feet. The room was a testament to the Vale wealth, towering stone fireplaces crackling with imported logs, crystal chandeliers casting diamond-like reflections on the walls adorned with original artworks from European masters, and floor-to-ceiling windows that usually offered breathtaking views of the Rocky Mountains but were now obscured by the blizzard. She wrapped her plain wool coat tighter around her shoulders, the one Thorn had bought her on their honeymoon in a quaint Vermont town a far cry from the designer labels her in-laws favored. At 42, Ilara was a woman of quiet grace, with warm brown eyes that held depths of kindness, curly auburn hair tied back in a simple ponytail, and a face etched with lines from years of smiling through adversity. She had grown up in a modest Midwest farming family, where hard work and humility were virtues, not weaknesses. Marrying Thorn, the heir to Apex Ventures, a conglomerate of luxury resorts and real estate developments, had thrust her into a world of privilege she never quite felt at home in. Across from her sat Isolde Vale, her mother-in-law, a formidable woman in her late 60s with sharp features, platinum hairstyled in an impeccable bob, and eyes like chips of ice. Beside her was Brielle Thorn's younger sister, 35, with the same aristocratic nose but softened by layers of makeup and a perpetual smirk. Both were dressed in mourning black, but their outfits screamed opulence. Isolde, in a tailored Chanel gown with a diamond brooch that could fund a small town. Brielle, in a form-fitting Versace number accessorized with emerald earrings that dangled like taunts. There was no redness in their eyes from crying, no slumped shoulders from loss, only an impatient greedy glint that made Ilara's stomach churn. From the very beginning of her marriage to Thorn, Ilara had been the unwanted intruder. Isolde had made no secret of her disdain, often remarking at family gatherings how Thorn could have done better than a small-town girl with no pedigree. Brielle, ever the echo, would chime in with snide comments about Ilara's inability to host proper events or her preference for homemade meals over catered affairs. Thorn had always defended her, his deep voice cutting through the tension like a warm breeze. Ilara is the heart of this family, mother. That's worth more than any fortune. But now, with Thorn Gaunt taken too soon by a rare, aggressive cancer that had ravaged him in just 9 months, Ilara felt exposed. Like a lone tree in a storm, the heavy oak door to the living room swung open with a creak. And in walked Mr. Harlan, Thorn's trusted attorney for over a decade. He was a wiry man in his 50s, dressed in a stiff gray suit that matched his salt-and-pepper hair, carrying a sleek leather portfolio that seemed to sag under its own importance. His face was neutral, but Ilara caught a flicker of something pity, unease, as his eyes met hers. Isolde and Brielle straightened like predators scenting blood, their postures shifting from feigned mourning to eager anticipation. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Isolde, Miss Brielle, Mrs. Ilara," Mr. Harlan greeted in a measured tone. Settling into an armchair that faced the 3 women, he adjusted his glasses, scanning each of them in turn. When his gaze lingered on Ilara, she felt a chill unrelated to the draft seeping through the windows. "I am here today to execute the last will and testament of Mr. Thornvale, duly signed, witnessed, and notarized 6 months ago." Ilara's heart pounded in her chest, a frantic rhythm that echoed in her ears. She didn't care about the money. Thorn's wealth had never been what drew her to him. It was his kindness, his laughter that filled rooms, the way he'd surprise her with wildflowers picked from the estate's gardens. What she craved now was some final affirmation, a word or gesture in ink that proved she had mattered, that their love hadn't been a fleeting illusion. Mr. Harlan opened the portfolio with deliberate care, extracting a sheaf of crisp papers bound by a gold clip. He cleared his throat and began reading the preliminary clauses, legal formalities about taxes and contingencies that blurred into a monotonous hum for Ilara. She lowered her eyes to her hands, clasped tightly in her lap, nails bitten short from stress, and willed herself to breathe steadily. Finally, the lawyer's voice sharpened as he reached the heart of the document. "To my esteemed mother, Isolde Vale," he read, "I bequeath full ownership and control of Apex Ventures, encompassing all shares, subsidiaries, real estate holdings, and associated assets, valued at approximately $150 million. Isolde's lips twitched into a barely contained smile, her fingers drumming lightly on the armrest. "In addition, I leave her the family chalet in Aspen, including all furnishings, artworks, and the fleet of 5 luxury vehicles registered under the company name." Brielle's eyes widened like saucers, and Isolde's smile bloomed into a triumphant grimace, her teeth flashing white against her crimson lipstick. They had secured the crown jewels, the business empire Thorn had built from his grandfather's modest startup, now a powerhouse in high-end tourism. The lawyer continued, his tone steady but with a subtle lowering, as if bracing for impact. "To my dear sister, Brielle Vale, I bequeath my personal investment portfolio, consisting of the luxury penthouse in downtown Denver, valued at $5 million, along with the funds in the high-yield trust account established in her name, currently holding $8.2 million. Brielle let out a muffled squeal, clapping her hands together in delight. "Oh, Thorn, you clever boy," she whispered, her voice dripping with satisfaction. Isolde glanced at Ilara with an expression of cruel victory, her eyes narrowing as if to say, "See, blood always wins." Ilara's cheeks flushed hot with humiliation. It wasn't the exclusion from the wealth that pierced, hurt was the silence around her name. as if she had been an afterthought, a footnote in Thorn's life. Had their whispered promises, under starlit skies, their shared dreams of a quiet retirement in the countryside, meant nothing. The room felt smaller, the air thicker, as Mr. Harlan cleared his throat again. This time with visible tension. And finally, to my cherished wife, Elara Vale. The words cherished wife hung in the air like a fragile ornament, both a bomb and a blade. Elara's breath caught, her eyes lifting hopefully. Double quotes, ... I bequeath the sole remaining asset from my grandfather's original inheritance, an old cabin located in the village of Frost Hollow, in the remote Rockies. The full address is attached hereto. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the distant howl of the wind outside. Then, Brielle shattered it with a sharp, incredulous laugh. Just that. A dusty old cabin, in some godforsaken village? She asked, her voice laced with malice. Her perfectly manicured nails tapping on her knee. Mr. Harlan swallowed audibly, adjusting his papers. The will further notes that all personal liquid assets were liquidated prior to Mr. Vale's passing to address urgent business obligations. There are no additional balances or bequests to distribute. That concludes the primary distributions. What happened next would haunt Elara for nights to come. Isolde threw her head back and erupted into strident laughter, not a polite chuckle, but a deep belly-shaking cackle that reverberated off the high ceilings like thunder. An old cabin in Frost Hollow, she mocked, wiping a tear from her eye that wasn't from grief. I wouldn't stable my horses there. It's probably crawling with rodents and falling apart at the seams. Thorn finally saw you for what you are, Elara charity case. Brielle joined in, her laughter high-pitched and piercing, mingling with her mother's in a symphony of derision. He knew your place all along, Brielle added between gasps. Off to the wilderness with the wildlife. Maybe you'll find a bear to keep you company, better match than Thorn ever was. Elara's tears spilled over, hot tracks down her cold cheeks. She wasn't weeping for the lost fortune. It was the betrayal, the orchestration of this moment by the man who had vowed to cherish her. She turned to Mr. Harlan, pleading with her eyes for some denial, some mistake. But the lawyer busied himself repacking his portfolio, his gaze averted. My duties are complete, he said hastily. I'll provide copies to Mrs. Isolde as the primary executor. He rose, offered a curt bow, and exited with the speed of someone fleeing a fire. The door hadn't even fully closed when Isolde's laughter cut off like a switch. Her face transformed, features hardening into a mask of ruthless contempt. She fixed Elara with a stare that could freeze lava. You've heard the will, Elara, she hissed, her voice low and venomous. You're nothing here now. A cabin, that's your lot. Why are you still sitting in my chair? Elara stammered, her voice cracking like thin ice. But this was our home, Thorn's and mine. I have memories here. Rights. Brielle interrupted with a scoff, rising to her feet. You have no rights, you barren intruder. Since you waltzed in, the family's image suffered. No children, no contributions, just leeching off Thorn. Do you think we didn't notice the business dips coinciding with your influence? Brielle, please, Elara murmured, trying to salvage a shred of dignity, her hands trembling. You have no right to speak to me like this. Thorn wouldn't.